Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Chris and this is my shop partner Oots. And today I have a really good shop project for you. I'm going to show you how I add this router lift to my table saw extension wing. It's a great project, let's get started. For a while now I wanted to get a router table for my shop so that I could really step up my router capabilities and take advantage of this incredibly versatile tool. The problem is I have a pretty small shop and don't have room for a router table. So I decided to take advantage of all this extra space on my extension wing on my table saw and make a router table there. I talked to the great folks at Rockler about this project and they sent me their new Pro Router lift, a router fence, some great dust collection stuff, and all sorts of really cool router table accessories. I start by laying out where I want my miter track, and looking at pictures from other router tables, it looks like they're about 4 to 5 inches away from the edge of the table, and then the lift is another 1 to 2 inches past that track. I'm not sure why it's laid out this way, but I'm trusting the industry standard and going with that. If you have any idea, please let me know down in the comments section because I'm definitely new to router tables. And using my table saw fence, I square up the lift and then center it using a rule. Then I just use a pencil to trace out the router lift. Now I need to remove the extension wing so that I can grind away some metal on the table saw support rails to give myself clearance for the miter track. Then, after a lot of uneasy pacing back and forth, I actually take an angle grinder to my brand new table saw. I do a little cleanup with a file and then paint the exposed metal with a high gloss enamel.
What's he doing? Get in the way. Get in the way.
Once I reinstall the extension wing, I can begin cutting away the hole where the router lift will sit. I start by drilling 4 holes in the corners, and this will let me drop a jigsaw in so I can cut out the middle section. I don't actually cut the entire middle out right now because I want this middle intact for my router to register in the next step. I leave a little material in each corner so that I can easily come back and finish cutting that later. Now I'll set my router on the router lift to set the depth of cut. I plunge the bit down until it touches my bench top, then I'll set the depth stop. I use my table saw fence and some scrap pieces of wood clamped to my extension wing as guides for the router. I carefully laid these out so that my router would not be able to cut past the lines that I traced earlier. And yes, I realized I forgot my respirator, but I was really nervous about this step, and so once I started, I didn't want to stop and risk screwing something up. Once I routed away that recess, I can now take that jigsaw and finish those last little cuts and drop away the middle section. Next, I bring over my table saw fence as a guide to cut out the miter track. I set the depth using the Ttrack the same way I did for the lift, and then cut out the groove in a couple passes. The bit I used was narrower than the Ttrack slot, so I had to move the table saw fence to cut to full width. I mark the Ttrack to length, then cut it at the miter saw, and then install it in the table. Now I'm going to install this nice paddle switch for the router so that I don't have to reach under and flip it on and off manually. I'll just drill a couple holes in this extension leg so I can screw it into place. In order to use the router fence that Rockler sent me, I need to add some Ttracks into the extension wing. You can buy metal ones and just route out a straight walled housing for that track, like I did for my miter track, or do what I'm doing here and cut the Ttrack right into the tabletop. First I plunged a 3/4 inch hole, then switched to a 3/8 inch bit and cut a groove using a scrap piece of wood as my guide. Then I used my Ttrack bit from Rockler to make the actual Ttrack channel underneath. Each time I change bits, I can ensure proper depth by dropping the bit into the hole and then locking my depth gauge. Now it's time to install the router into the lift. And while I'm doing that, I want to stop and thank Rockler for sponsoring this video and sending me all this great router gear. I recently got to meet some great Rockler folks and play with this new Pro Router lift, and I knew right away that I wanted this lift for this project. I have links to all these tools, parts, and accessories that I use in this project down in the description, so make sure you check them out and support me by supporting Rockler. Also, if you're new to the channel and like what you see, please consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you hit the little bell icon, that'll send you notifications anytime I put out new videos. Off camera, I installed this dust shroud, which is a metal box that I screwed to the bottom of the table. It has an access door and attachments for your dust collection. Now all I do is drop the router lift into the table. I test the table saw fence to make sure the router lift doesn't interfere at all. The great thing about this setup is that the router fence is super easy to put on and take off, and when it's off, the table saw isn't hindered at all. Next, I'll finish up on the dust collection. This attachment allows me to run a second hose up to the router fence to really capture a lot of dust. One of the nice things about this Pro lift is that it has both quick and fine adjustments. This allows me to raise and lower the router really fast to get it close, and then I can make my micro adjustments. I have a ton of learning when it comes to using this router table, but I'm really excited because there's nearly endless tasks and operations that I can do with this. With a router table like this, you can make really small molding, cut dados, rabbets, mortise and tenons, half laps, joint edges, make raised panels, and the list goes on and on. This table gives you a much larger and more stable surface than you're able to get from just using the router handheld. Changing bits with this lift is really easy too. I make sure to switch the power off to the router or unplug it, and then I just raise the router up to change the collets or bits. Well, I hope you liked this shop improvement project and found the information useful. Let me know down in the comment section if you have a router table and what are some of the things that you use it for. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.